Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rocky Top Insider Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Foster, joined alongside Ryan Schumpert, as always, coming at you on a Wednesday, February 12th edition. We are 2 days away from first pitch in Knoxville. Jorel Ortega days away from first pitch. Ariel Antigua days away from first pitch. Max Ferguson as well, you can throw in. Lots of number twos in Tennessee history. But Ryan, we got quite a few things to get into today. If you missed it, did a season preview last week, full 90-minute pod, lots of good stuff there, but some stuff that we need to update a little bit as far as starting rotation predictions go, because we have some new intel to get into, and as well as some takeaways from Tennessee Baseball's Pizza Series that went on last weekend here in Knoxville. So a lot to get into today, Ryan, but first, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's been an eventful last week or so for Tennessee baseball and the final little bit of the preseason, and even just an eventful day today with Alberto Osuna and his uh, lawsuit or filed a complaint with federal court with the NCAA trying to get eligibility. So um, only very Tennessee baseball-ish to be very entertaining and a lot of drama leading into the season, but they never leave us without something to talk about.
Absolutely not. And not only is it not Tennessee baseball without some drama that, doesn't pertain to really what's going on the field, but it has to involve the NCAA at some point too,
Yeah.
because we know there's been multiple instances of that. At least, Ryan, from a rider's perspective and going into the season, a little bit more prepared this year than 2 years ago when it was all of a sudden
Yeah.
Maui Huna has eligibility issues on opening day, and no one knew about it until about 2 hours before first pitch, if I'm not mistaken. So at least there's a little bit of preparation this time around. Ryan, let's start there with Alberto Osuna, the North Carolina transfer first baseman, who is in line to, be Tennessee's opening day starter, I think, at first base. So we know he can rake at the plate and has been around for quite a while and had some good years over in Chapel Hill. But now it looks obviously highly unlikely that Alberto Osuna will be playing with the team this weekend against Hofstra because of this new concern with his eligibility not being approved yet by the NCAA.
Yeah, I don't think that part wasn't a surprise. Like, we knew when he committed a week and a half ago, I guess at this point, to exactly 14 days before the season opener, that he wasn't immediately eligible, that he was going to have to get approval. But like we mentioned, Osuna's lawyer filed a case today, a complaint with the NCAA, and that document gave us some more information, I guess. And I guess really more than anything on the front that you're discussing, it kind of showed us the timeline of things in a lot of ways. It said essentially before, because Osuna was at Tampa, he was going to play a year of University of Tampa. He's going to play a year of D2 baseball because I still don't understand how that works. I've asked multiple people, and no one's been able to explain to me how he had a year of Division II eligibility, but not a year of Division I eligibility. But nonetheless, that was the case. And so after the Pavia ruling, he reached out to the NCAA, inquiring essentially about his potentially having another year of Division I eligibility. The NCAA told him that he would have to transfer to another school, essentially. Like, the school would have to request a claim for him, and he would not be able. They were not just going to tell him ahead of time. So he transfers to Tennessee on. I'm trying to think of what the date of that would have been.
Late January, right?
The first or the 31st, I guess, of January. I guess it'd be the. Yeah, I guess it'd be the first. I think it would have been February 1st. Tennessee submitted that claim on February 3rd. So maybe it was January 31st because it was Friday night, and the 3rd would be that Monday. That would seemingly make sense. And as of Monday, the 11th, or Tuesday, the 11th, the NCAA still hadn't even assigned a person to the case. So the NCAA has been very slow. Not only have they not told Osuna that what his status is, other than that he's got to, or I guess they've told him his status as of right now is that he's ineligible. But for his appeal and his waiver to get an extra year of eligibility, they haven't even assigned someone to it at this point. And I think that in itself is what has led Osuna and his team to file this lawsuit to try to get a little bit of help from a federal court. And, it's an overall lawsuit, just basically the exact same as the Diego Pavia lawsuit with the Sherman antitrust case. Is kind of that's what they're saying as to why he should have eligibility. And like Pavia, he's also had a temporary or requesting a temporary restraining order against the NCAA, which would make him immediately eligible to play. Pavia did the same thing. They did not get that request, or that did not get approved. So we'll see what happens on Osuna. Obviously, this is a lot more pressing. Pavia was still 10 months away, 9 months away from playing that next season. And as soon as this is 2 days away from first pitch, but that's kind of where things stand as of right now.
Obviously, that affects the player and the team as far as availability. You talking about the time frame with when this stuff happens, because obviously Pavia doesn't play football for a while. Could that affect anything on the NCAA side as far as approving, since it's so close to the season?
I mean,
You
you would
think? I
think
mean, I know
so.
you're not. I know obviously neither of us are experts in any of this. I hate talking about all the
Yeah.
freaking legal stuff, but just curious if you know anything else about that.
Yeah, I mean, my thought would be just logically, yes. You would think
Right.
there would be some level of sense of urgency, but just from that point that I stated that they haven't even 8 days after
Yeah.
Tennessee filed the waiver, the fact that no one had even been assigned to it would seem to say no. I was told that there are a handful of other players on different schools. I believe one at Georgia too that are affected by this. Um, so it's not like Osuna is the only player in the country on a roster, kind of waiting for this rule to hopefully get changed, or the NCAA and now the NCAA to force, or a federal court to force the NCAA's hand on it. But obviously, Osuna is the one that stepped up and filed the lawsuit. And I guess one thing that's important to state of like why this is different from the Pavia claim is that the Pavia won his lawsuit, and the NCAA basically put out a blanket waiver that said any athlete whose final year of Division I eligibility that would be affected by the junior college ruling is anyone whose final year is during the 2024-2025 academic year, you're good. Like if you're playing right now, Pavia, he was playing what was his last year right
Yep.
now. They said you're good for next year. But they did not say what they did not do is say people whose final year was the 2023-24 academic year, which is what Osuna is. They did not give them a waiver to be eligible to play
Ah.
a fifth year. So that's
Ooh,
really where the difference is right now.
that's a
I
big
would
difference.
assume, obviously, the NCAA hasn't come out and said anything. I would assume the NCAA's logic or case would be is like, well, if we do it to someone in 23-24 who was already out of eligibility, it was already all over, then we have to do that for everyone ever. We can do that for some 30-year-old who was playing 2 years of junior college and then 2 years of Division One. I would assume that would be the logic. A friend of the program, Caleb Giroux of the
Right.
Maryville Daily Times, we were texting about it. He was like, "Well, they got to get D. Williams back with another year of eligibility,
Yeah.
because he would be like a perfect example of that. A guy who's been gone for multiple years, but technically he has one more year. Though I guess he's been making money from in the NFL, so maybe not the perfect example, but a
Yeah.
general look at the logic there.
Yeah. It just feels like, yeah, that's a good. Yeah, that to me is a huge difference. Like, I mean, it's all everything's a fine line, and if they cross that bridge and do and grant Osuna eligibility, if there's other people in his case, then like you said, it may get really messy. So, do you think this could be something that's really ongoing for Tennessee this year, and could potentially not get solved? Like, what's your confidence level in and this, blowing over by it, not, blowing over is not the right word, but getting everything
Resolved.
getting sorted out by
Yep.
SEC play? What would be your confidence level on a scale of 1 to 10 based on what like it's all speculation. I know, like I
Yeah.
said, but just kind of what you're hearing, what you're reading, what you're inferring.
I would say like a 6 or a 7 would be my confidence level. Tennessee seems to have some confidence about it. And look, like my standing thing or my general, like the NCAA doesn't win any of these things anymore. They don't.
Yeah.
When the last time the NCAA won anything in court? Like we sit here and talk about it, and I'm like, yeah, like I think the NCAA has an argument. I see the argument. I don't think
No, it
it's
makes a
dumb.
lot of sense, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but at the same time, it's just the slippery slope aspect of it. So it wouldn't shock me if it doesn't get resolved and he doesn't get eligible. But as of right now, we sit here 2 days out from the season. Um, I think it will. And I think when you look specifically at this case, I think that's maybe where you lean more towards Tennessee being in Osuna getting eligibility, like Tennessee being in a good spot. I'll just read going through the claim today, the lawsuit today. This was the statement that I thought that really stood out, and it's a little bit of a longer one. So I feel like this really explains the Pavia and Osuna situation pretty well, and how
Okay.
similar they are with really just that one small difference. So this is from the claim that Osuna filed. Although Pavia and Osuna have identical college eligibility records, 1 year disregarded for COVID-19, 1 JUCO year, and 3 Division I years, the NCAA's blanket waiver does not, on its face, extend relief to Osuna. Unlike football, collegiate baseball is played in the spring. Therefore, Osuna must use his 4th year of Division I eligibility during the spring 2025 baseball season. Because the NCAA blanket waiver extends eligibility only to athletes using their 4th year of Division I eligibility for fall 2025 or spring 2026 seasons, Osuna is not covered by the waiver. This arbitrary distinction harms Osuna and is another example of the NCAA's unlawful restrictions on the market for Division I athletics. So that, I think, kind of explains the situation of where he's kind of in a weird middle ground right now, even though, like it says on paper, his situation is really the exact same as Pavia's, but his season ending, whatever it would have been 5-6 months earlier than Pavia's is kind of made this a tricky spot for the NCAA and then just the case as a whole.
Mm. Well, there you have it. Obviously, we'll keep you updated on all that over at rocktopinsider.com. But yeah, sticky situation there with Alberto Osuna. Hopefully that can get resolved and he can get to playing some baseball for Tennessee at some point in the near future. Well, our job is to look at this current team and forecast, what it's going to look like on Friday night and in the near future here in the early part of the season. As I mentioned, season starts in just 2 days. So without Alberto Osuna this weekend against Hofstra for Tennessee, who will they turn to at first base? Well, there's quite a bit of candidates. As if you recall, last week in our season preview, first base was obviously a position with a lot of competition, a lot of candidates going into it. And one was taken away with Alex Perry leaving the program, but still a lot of guys who could play that spot. And Ryan, as I mentioned, the pizza series was played last weekend. We saw, kind of got a good indication of who could potentially get more reps than others at that first base spot. And injury note to tie into all of this is that Andrew Fisher and Cannon Peebles will both be available for Tennessee this weekend. Now, that's Tennessee's presumed third baseman and catcher for the year, but Fisher is a corner infielder and can play first base too if needed. Peebles being available behind the plate or a DH spot is obviously very valuable for Tennessee as well. So, Ryan, let's start by looking at this first base spot. We know Dalton Bargo, the ultimate utility man, is in the mix. I mentioned Fisher can play both corner infield spots. If his injury is, hampering him from playing at third, he could potentially be a candidate to start at first to open the season. And then there's some young guys, Levi Clark and Stone Lawless. I know Levi Clark got quite a few reps over at first base and has looked impressive in his first preseason with Tennessee baseball as a true freshman.
Yeah, those three are the three. I sitting here on Wednesday, I really think my prediction might be that each one of them starts one game at first base this weekend. I really think that's possible. It probably, it's dependent on a number of things, like you said, with the injuries. Cannon Peebles, if Cannon Peebles is only going to DH this weekend, then, it's probably more likely that you'd see Bargo behind the plate one game, and maybe more likely you'd see Fisher at first base than third. If you can't, also put him in the DH spot, but you want that bat in the order. So during the pizza series last week, the way they pretty roughly divided the teams, it was the best hitters on one team and the best pitchers on the other. So it was like top pitchers with backup lineup, top hitters with, a little bit further down the depth chart or the pecking order pitchers. And Levi Clark started 2 of those games for the top hitters team at first base. And then Andrew Fisher played first base. He didn't hit any, but he played third base for most of the Sunday scrimmage or exhibition game. So I think you'll definitely see Clark there at least one game, if not a couple. And it wouldn't surprise me to see Fisher be there too, as one of the things Tony Vitello said is that Peebles and Fisher are available, but we probably won't play them every single game. We probably won't be overly aggressive with them. So because of that, and just some of the limitations with that arm soreness he has, playing him at first base instead of third would make some sense.
And Tony and the staff by nature, as most baseball coaches are going to be early in a season, especially in the SEC, going to be overly conservative.
Yep.
So they've always erred on the side of caution with literally everything. So I would expect them to do the same with these two guys. You talked about catcher. Let's just to wrap up this whole conversation. It felt like Cannon Peebles, Stone Lawless were the guys behind the plates. When we did our preview last week, you mentioned Dalton Bargo. He caught at Mizzou some. I think he had a couple of reps behind the plate last year. I don't know if he actually started a game, but he definitely had a handful of innings under his belt there. So there's, do you think that both Stone Lawless and Dalton Bargo will see time behind the plate this weekend, or is it like a Peebles and Bargo scenario? Where do you see that going with the catcher spot?
I think it's, I think Peebles obviously the guy, as you said, if he's good to go. I think Lawless is second and then Bargo third.
Okay. So let's say Peebles is only DH or not playing this weekend. You think it's Lawless 2 games, Bargo 1 maybe, or potentially Lawless all 3?
Yeah, I would think Lawless 2 games, Bargo 1.
Right.
And then, maybe the reverse. If Peebles is good to go, 2 for Peebles, 1 for Lawless, or maybe it'd be the other version, 1 for Peebles, 2 for Lawless. But I think they'll start 2 guys there this weekend, and I think Lawless will for sure be one of them. And then whether Peebles is fully able to go and it feels good enough to be behind the plate and Tennessee wants to do that, then it would be Peebles. If not, if they're just going to DH Peebles, I think Bargo will get a shot back there.
And bringing third base into the situation here, what's more likely? Okay. If, say, Andrew Fisher's at first base or DHing, that leaves third open. What's more likely? Curley shift Curley over and play Ariel? Okay, so I guess my question would be, what's more likely? Ariel starting in the infield or Bargo playing third?
I'll go option C. I think Manny Marin at starting at
Okay.
third would be the most likely. He got some 2 games of run with the top lineup playing third base. Yeah, that was what I would go with the most likely. Again, it just feels they're playing Hofstra, who's probably spent 40 minutes practicing outside all preseason to this point. I imagine Tennessee will do a bunch of things this weekend, but I would say if Fisher's not at third, Marin, I would think is the most likely person to get more opportunities there.
So you would put Manny Marin over Ariel Antigua in just a general pecking order of everybody. Like
Entering the
you,
season.
you think he's more apt to get more opportunities than Ariel this year, at least early on.
Yes. I think they'll both get opportunities, but I feel like Marin is a little bit ahead of the pecking order, and I trust him or I have more confidence in him seizing the opportunities he gets than I do Ariel.
Yeah, Manny Marin, a guy, we didn't touch on a whole lot in our season preview, but obviously, Ryan, you expressed how you're pretty high on him, and he got plenty of run this past weekend in the Pizza Series. Just bringing the freshmen back up again. Levi Clark, Manny Marin, there's some arms that we've discussed, but, reading what happened in the Pizza Series last weekend and looking at the reports and the lineups, it felt like there's quite a few freshmen when it comes to at the plate who have a ton of potential. Do you think that, even extended beyond the Abernathys, the Marins, the Levi Clarks, that there could be more freshmen get into the mix relatively consistently this year, like a Chris Newstrom, Jackson Walker? There's other guys who have who got some, playing time in this Pizza Series, which is, potentially indicative of them having roles this year. Obviously not everyday starters, but do you think that these freshmen can make an impact for Tennessee this year?
I think so. I think Newstrom's probably the sleeper because he's a guy that had a lot of hype coming in, and not that he was bad in the fall by any means, but certainly it felt like a step below that trio of the one you just mentioned of Clark, Abernathy, and Marin. But he's had a good preseason. He had a really good weekend, and I think to me there's more. opportunity in the outfield. Like the outfield has more, generally speaking, submitted as to who's going to start, but I think there's a little bit more unproven nature besides Hunter Hensley. In the corners, there's a more unproven nature of what you're going to get from Reese Chapman or what you're going to get from a Jay Abernathy or Colby Backus in left field. So because of that, I could see, Newstrom getting some more opportunities, just because maybe if Chapman were to struggle and just how up in the air still left field is, which is where Newstrom spent most of his time, is in left field. So, yeah, I would tend to think it would be more midweek opportunities this year for guys like Walker, for guys like Newstrom. But, again, it's this first month of the season will be treated largely like midweeks at points. So those guys getting some chances certainly would not be surprising.
Any more Pizza Series takeaways you want to get into before we shift a conversation to the pitching and what to expect this weekend?
Can I get into? Do you want me to get into a couple of pitching notes? Maybe not starting pitching notes.
No, Pizza Series pitching notes. Let's save for the pitching discussion. But I'm talking like infield, outfield, at the plate. Any other Pizza Series notes here?
Gotcha. Stone Lawless hit 2 home runs. He had a really nice weekend. So this is something I'll probably say a good bit again. Gavin Keelan is the most quiet 2-hit game guy ever.
You're gonna love Gavin Keelan.
I think he had 2 hits every single game, and there wasn't like a single game. I wasn't there on Saturday, but on Friday or Sunday, it wasn't like, oh man, he's just killing it. But he just steadily gets on base. And then I guess on that front, Curly and Gavin Keelan. Gosh, I cannot.
1-2.
Yes, those guys were 1-2 in the order. Curly 1, Keelan 2. They alternated second and shortstop basically every inning. In the end, look, I think it's going to be Curly at shortstop and Keelan at second. But I imagine.
Oh wait, yeah, that's what we figured.
Yeah, but I imagine again, as I say for the 6th time, they'll probably tinker and do a bunch of different stuff here early in the season. But to me, that feels relatively inevitable that Curly ends up at short and Keelan at second.
All right, one last thing. Fun game. Rank the positions Dalton Bargo is more likely to see the most time at between first base, third base, and catcher.
This weekend?
Or throw left field in there too. Yeah, let's just say like early part of this, while Osuna's still out of the picture.
First base 1.
Okay.
Left field 2, catcher 3, third base 4.
Okay, so that means Marin has, put himself in that good a spot to where third base feels like leaning on Bargo is on down the line of potential outcomes.
Yeah, and it's like even to get to Manny, Fisher's got to be playing first base, So that's one thing that's already got to change. And then you have Manny, and then you have a number of other options even after Manny besides Bargo. So to me, that just feels the least likely.
Yeah, it's like you move Keelan and Curly over and put Ariel at second or whatever. Yeah. All these guys are very versatile. It's a good problem to have.
Yep.
Let's shift to the pitching discussion. Kind of a shocker, a little bit of a bombshell. I was talking to Ryan before we started recording. Marcus Phillips being named the Saturday starter for Tennessee to open the season. Not something, we saw coming as far as last week goes. But I said, Ryan, how surprised were you? And he said, yeah, I was surprised. But, after watching Tennessee in the Pizza Series and everything that unfolded this past weekend at LNS, it kind of made more sense. So Marcus Phillips obviously has earned the trust enough from Tony and Frank to earn this starting role in a day 2 setting. We'll see what happens on day 3. Liam Doyle is the Friday night starter for Tennessee, as we all predicted. Sunday will be, whether it's, freshman Tegan Coons, obviously Nate Snead and Dylan Loy, who are returners, and then Brandon Arvidsson, the JUCO guy. Those 4 feel like the most likely candidates. But Marcus Phillips, the fireman, starting on day 2 for Tennessee baseball. What was your reaction to this news?
Yeah, I think it's, again, to what you said, it was the fact that he started on the pitcher pro team on Saturday. That seemed to be a pretty telling sign. And that one of the other times I'd been over there to watch him scrimmage this preseason, he had been in a starter role that day, that it wasn't a 9-inning scrimmage. So that aspect of it, kind of more prepared for. But if you had told me this in December at the end of the fall, I would have been really surprised. Just because his what we've seen from him and the inconsistencies and the command issues seemed like it was more late inning bullpen guy, just because
Yeah.
obviously the stakes are high, but if it goes wrong, you can kind of pivot a lot easier than you can in a starting pitching role. So, look, I think it speaks highly to the offseason he's had. I think it speaks really highly to the trust and confidence he's gained, and certainly Vitello, but obviously Frank Anderson too. Look, Frank Anderson's a guy that prioritizes throwing strikes more than anything else.
Yeah.
So if he feels good enough to give Marcus Phillips a chance to start the season as a starter, I think that speaks to how he's improved in that area.
Yeah. My reaction was knowing what Marcus Phillips did last year in the back of my mind. I'm like, dang, okay, he must like really be improved because, like you said, there was command issues. He was kind of a question mark. Literally, anytime he went out there, he could start a midweek and give up 4 runs in the first inning. I don't think he ever did that, but it was something along those lines where he was getting rocked in the first inning or couldn't throw a strike. And then he can come in and Hoover and just absolutely deal for a couple innings
Yeah.
and save your game in a way. So I think this is good for Tennessee. The fact that Marcus Phillips, who has all the talent in the world, to have improved enough and to be entrusted in this role. Other question about Marcus is, do you think this is more of an opener role, or do you think he's like can be a legit starter for Tennessee and, go up to 85, 90 pitches, or do you see this more of a pitch count guy, couple inning thing? Like we saw with Ben Joyce when he started that one time.
Well, this weekend it'll be pitch count like everybody. Like I doubt he'll throw more than 75 pitches, but no, I mean I think if things go well, I don't think anybody's closing the door on the possibility of him being a guy that goes out there and throws 90 to 100 pitches in 6 or 7 innings as a starter. Like I don't think he's strictly an opener type guy. I don't think if they viewed him just as an opener type guy, he would be getting this opportunity this weekend.
Gotcha.
To be frank, so yeah, I think it's possible, and I think it's exciting because when you look at all these pitching combinations, it's like if everything goes right with any sort of combination, like what raises Tennessee's ceiling the most. And I think Marcus Phillips as a weekend starter and things going well does a ton to raise Tennessee's ceiling.
Looking at day 3, I mentioned the 4 guys that are probably that come to mind as candidates to start for Tennessee. As I said, it's TBD for the day 3 starter against Hofstra. Any new revelations from the pizza series? Any new predictions from you? Change of opinion with these 4 guys, and who you think is more apt to get a starting role for Tennessee?
No, not really a ton in the long term. I guess some short term notes. Brandon Arvidsson, Dylan Loy, Tegan Coons all threw just 1 inning each. And I was told that's because they hadn't thrown in like a scrimmage yet in the fall. Some of them had been sick, some other things that had kind of got them a little bit behind. So just to say they're not as built up as some of Tennessee's other pitchers are. So does that mean that they wouldn't start on Sunday? Not necessarily. But if they did, it would probably look more like what we were discussing a minute ago, an opener, 40 pitches, 50 pitches instead of 75 pitches. So that'll be worth watching. I just don't think, not that it can't be the case this weekend, I just don't think if Marcus Phillips ends up being a starting pitcher for this team in the weekend, I just don't think Nate Snead will be too.
Right.
I think it's kind of one or the other. So, Snead could pitch on Sunday, start on Sunday, but my guess is they use him out of the pen before that. And my guess is you see whoever does start on Sunday this week, it's more of an opener role. They don't throw a ton of pitches and don't get as deep into the game as Doyle or Phillips will.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to replicate what you had with Sechrist and Snead, at least in the for the majority of the season, not necessarily in the postseason, it feels like Loy is that guy to have an opener role before Snead can take the reins. That makes a ton of sense to the mind, as like I said, trying to kind of copy and paste what you had last year.
Yeah.
As far as Tegan Kuntz goes, this is a guy that I think pretty much unanimously everyone expected to, or at least was a favorite to have a starting role in the weekend. Why do you think that didn't end up happening? Do you think it's just because of what Marcus has shown and that this is how Tennessee has the most upside with their staff is Marcus starting? Not necessarily anything Kuntz did. What do you think that, didn't end up happening, I guess is my question.
That's a good question. He's one that was sick, I know, and that's why he only threw he hadn't been built up. I think he maybe missed a bullpen because of the being sick, and that's why he only threw an inning in the pizza series. But he was really good. I mean, he retired to side, I think, like 10 pitches. So I don't know. I would lean towards saying it's more to do with what Marcus Phillips has done, and I would also say it doesn't mean that he can't end up being the Sunday guy. It
Yeah.
couldn't end up being Phillips and then Coons, but yeah, no, it definitely felt like Phillips has kind of jumped. It felt like Doyle and Coons was most likely Friday, Saturday,
Right.
at least when we exited fall. So now it being Phillips instead of Coons is notable, but I think it probably says more about Phillips than it does about Coons.
Gotcha. And it would, we talked about the handedness of these arms. It would give, if Coons is in the pen, it gives you another righty. Um,
Yeah.
so, we'll see what happens. Like I said last week, I don't think Tennessee really has a problem with this. But I know, sometimes you value having that kind of flexibility in the pen compared to another guy. We'll see what happens. But yeah, definitely a question mark for Sunday. I would lean not Snead, as you said. When I saw Marcus Phillips got the nod, like you said, it's just hard to see Snead and Phillips both starting. They're so kind of similar in a way, and I just think that you want to have Snead as a backup plan given Phillips's struggles too. It could go wrong quick with him, and Snead is always going to be a safety valve in a way, and a guy with a really high ceiling game to game.
One
Let's
other
Yeah, go
one
ahead.
other option I'll throw in there as a potential starter, especially this Sunday that we didn't talk about last week, would be Michael Sharman, junior college guy. He started for the pro hitting team, I guess, on Friday in the pizza series, and he did not have a great outing. But he's another
Okay.
guy that I think you could toss in there as a potential option. A little bit more built up right now, and a guy that's going to get a lot of chances here early in the season.
Yeah, and he's a lefty, right?
Correct. Yep.
Right. All right, moving on to this weekend. Not going to do a full series preview or anything because, as you can imagine, Tennessee should be able to handle business relatively easily this weekend against Hofstra, who hail from New York, Hempstead, New York. And it's the Hofstra Pride. Great mascot name. Love that. Really unique. They'll be coming to town. And really, the sort of quick preview we'll do here, Ryan, is what do you want to see out of Tennessee this weekend in its opening series? A ton of question marks all across the board as to who's going to be where. And, we've obviously gotten into that, but really just what do you want to see out of Tennessee's performance and maybe specific guys you're really looking at here in this weekend?
Yeah, Hofstra, Darlington, Dubar. Maybe he'll make it over to
That's right.
one of the games this weekend. But I think it's a lot of what we said. It's what role the pitching to me is more interesting because I feel like I have an idea of what the lineup's going to look like. What even with them shuffling the deck, like what the potential options are of who starts where in the field. Pitching rolls past just starters. I'm curious to see who they put in different spots. And look, Hofstra might not test it too much and make any of that unique, but I'm curious to see what that looks like. Ryan Combs, they used as a closer twice over the weekend. I'm curious to see if he's a late inning guy. I'm curious to see how they use Braden Krenzel. So I guess the thing I'll be looking for, I'll give one pitching and then one hitting. What do the junior college arms look like? What do we see? How Tennessee uses those guys? Because they have a bunch of them: Combs, Sharman,
Crabtree,
Crabtree,
Arvidsson.
and Arvidsson. Yeah, those are the big four right
Oh,
there.
and
So
Breedlove, right?
Breedlove too. Yep. So what does that look like? How do they use those guys? Where in the weekend? Win in a game? I think that will all be interesting. I'm very curious what the pecking order will end up looking like amidst those guys, and then in the lineup, I think what I want to see is Cannon Peebles and Reese Chapman get off to good starts this season. Those are two really talented guys who I think are locked in starting spots to start the season. They're going to have to lose them. Less competition for them than most guys on the field, and they have talent. They've flashed at times, but Tennessee needs them to be more consistent and to show more than they've done in the past. So a good weekend against Hofstra. It's not going to be the end all be all by any means, but it would just be a good start for those guys to start their seasons having some success, and then trying to build off that as Tennessee marches through February and then into early March.
There you have it. First pitch, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. 4:30 p.m. Eastern time,
Yeah.
excuse me, on Friday, Valentine's Day, in Lindsey Nelson Stadium. Saturdays at 4 Eastern, Sunday at noon. So some early first pitch times here this weekend. That is a welcome sight, no doubt. We'll turn around and host UNC Asheville on Tuesday before hosting Sanford in a 3-game series next weekend. So you have 8 games at home to start the season before Tennessee hits the road to go over to the Astros Foundation College Classic in Houston to play Oklahoma State, Rice, and Arizona. So we'll learn a lot over these next 8 games, Ryan. Obviously not against tough competition or anything like that, but as you said, the roles, who Tennessee goes to first out of the pen in a given situation, or how they're going to piggyback these games, and really, roles aside, all that stuff. I just want to see what Marcus Phillips looks like, because
Yeah.
I said on Chase Thomas podcast last week, we're doing this like baseball thing later in the weeks, and he's just, who are you most excited to watch this year? And I didn't. This was before Marcus Phillips starting, before Pizza Series. I'm just like, I want to see Marcus Phillips this year because he's electric when his stuff is good, and if his stuff's good enough, consistently enough for Frank to give him a starting role, it could be a great season for Marcus Phillips. So that is what is intriguing me the most right now.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. Some of these arms Tennessee has that we haven't seen much, I think, are really talented. And I think it's going to be really exciting to watch them this weekend, and like you said, throughout the preseason.
Well, that's Ryan, ladies and gentlemen. You can follow him at rshump00 on all social media platforms. I'm at Jack Foster Media, and of course, follow Rocky Top Insider at Rocky Top Insider for all of your Tennessee athletics coverage needs. Also, stay up to date over at RockyTopInsider.com. But for Ryan, I'm Jack. We'll see you next week.